that's a combination I've used quite a bit. Also, I use that same combination of plantain, violet leaf, and white oak bark for hemangionas. And it takes several weeks and a lot of attention, but it's like amazing. It was actually one little baby, because hemangionas are masses of blood vessels that come to the surface, and there's no treatment for them, and you're born with them. You know, so babies are born with them. And there was this little baby who was born with half of his head was hemangioma. And so all the capillaries of blood vessels are in clumps, raised clumps on top of his head. So his grandmother came to see me, so I said, just apply this topically, this decoction, and I showed her how to make it. I actually showed her how to gather the plantain, and she knew nothing about herbs. And she made the decoction, and every time the baby had a nap, she would take a washcloth and dip in the decoction and lay on the baby's head. And she made photographs the whole way, the whole process, over about a 6-month period. And actually it ended up in court because her daughter, who is a meth addict, was trying to get custody of grandchild from mom, the meth addict, so they ended up in a custody court battle. And one of the things the daughter said was, you know, she puts herbs on his head. And Grandma had documented from day 1 through 6 months when they went to court, and she took all the photographs in and said, you know, this is what I did, and this is how it looks then, and this is how it looks now. And she had all the little stages, and the judge said, you know, I'm no doctor, but it looks like it's working me. And said, you know, I'm not going to use this as your mom's using herbs. So obviously it's working because, you know, the judge actually had a doctor come in and say there's no cure for this. The child will be scarred for the rest of his life. And by the time the child was 2 years old, she kept doing it. It's a long, slow process. But by the time it was 2 years old, it had gone from being all of his head to the side of the dime. That's where it was down to the last time I saw him. It was pretty amazing. But this is true, I think, of a lot of herbal treatments. You have to be diligent, and you have to be, you have to really want to continue doing the treatments. And Grandma did. A lot of people would have just like gone, this is too much trouble to do this 3 times a day, every 5 days a week. I'm not going to do that, but, she did. And it was her perseverance that really paid off. So I love white oak bark for drawing in strengthening the vessels, and it kind of drew them in. And so I use it for varicose veins, too. White oak bark is really good for varicose veins. And I usually don't do it. It's so astringent on the stomach, I usually put something else with it, like the violet leaf, which makes the violets a little mucilaginous, or the plantain is a little mucilaginous. And it really makes it not so tough on the digestive tract and the food. So that's one of the reasons that's the combination I picked. So varicose veins. Yesterday we talked about butcher's broom and horse chestnut. But I think for some people the white oak bark works just as well. Especially if there's fever in the veins, which people, sometimes, especially women, can get fever in the varicose veins. And you can tell if there's fever in it just by looking at it. You can feel it by touch because the vein will feel hot. But it'll look, through the skin, you can see that the vein has lost some integrity, that it looks, it's not outlined as well, like the vein, here's the outline of it. The edges appear very diffuse through the skin and have a bit of a yellow-green cast to them, like it's bruised, but it's really not. And so there's usually heat to that, and there's fever in that vein when it happens. That combination works really well for that.
There's say bluish black veins with yellow around them, so there's some green in there, and they look like clumps of grapes or like corrugated. It's like really ugly. Like these are the veins you least want. Like the ugliest veins is generally the white oak bark veins. Like not that there's any attractive varicose veins, but but these are the worst. And so there is, although there may be some people, there's not usually much redness in there. There's usually these dark colors. So, and I remember one case where I went to look at the guy. This was an interesting case because it is an impotence remedy. He said partial impotence he had, and his wife was there, so that evidently was truthful. She nodded. And he had some blackish and bluish on the veins of the hand. And I said, "Oh, do you have varicose veins?" He said, "Oh yeah, plenty. That's not so common in a man." He was in his 50s. Not so common in a man. And so I gave him the oak bark and compared that partial veins. And I later heard from Terry Willard. He used that herbalist up in Calgary. He'd use that for varicose veins as well in 2 cases. So, excuse me, impotence in 2 cases. Those are the only cases I know of. But actually, astringents help with impotence because they tighten the flap that keeps the blood in there. So there could be impotence from all sorts of different causes. And I have never seen an article that went through all the causes, but that would be one of them. So it's not just psychological, it could be. And it's interesting, Dr. Bach does this personality. He says the oak bark, the oak, he's a European oak, which is the most similar looking oak to our white oak. So it's no wonder that the pioneers thought of the white oak as, well, this is the oak we're going to use. It became official over here. But it also is kind of, it's a very astringent looking oak, one might say. It looks most astringent, I think. But at any rate, Dr. Bach used the European white oak and or English oak, and he said it's for people who struggle on against adversity but never succeed, but never give up. It's kind of integrity issues. And indeed, it's been used in Europe as an alcoholism remedy, and it is an alcoholism remedy. Even just the tea, drinking the tea. You could use the Bach flower essence, but that has some brandy in it. But it is an alcoholism remedy, and I remember one woman, her son and his girlfriend were in Alcoholics Anonymous, and she gave them that tea, and it helped them both. She said, yes, it like improved the integrity in it. And of course they mentioned that at the Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. But it increases integrity in it. But it's a subtle thing, because I gave it to my friend Susan. I want to talk about my friend Susan. And she got bucked off a horse, and she got her veins just got expanded, like it was like the shock of the fall or something, like, I don't know, jolted them, and they were just much larger across her chest. And I thought, oh, oak bark, because they were dark looking. And that astringed the veins, and she said, oh no, she said the lesson of this, she got it even better than Dr. Bach. She said, this is the remedy that helps you know which battles you can win. And so that gives a deeper understanding. No wonder they're struggling on against adversity that they can't defeat, because it's not a struggle they should have gotten in the first place. They should say, hey, I can't win that one, forget it. And if they give up on those, then they'll have more integrity in the places where it counts, you know. So, and it was kind of, I just got to go on a little bit, because this guy had a surname that I recognized right away as a name of a park in Duluth. They were from Duluth. I said, are you related to blah, blah, blah? So yeah, that was my grandfather. And his grandfather owned this like 600-acre farm with a big old, like, massive, like, house built out like the Condon Mansion. It's like about half the size. You know, it was a mansion, not a farmhouse, and he had this farm. And he got in all these fights with the city government. So they put a sidewalk down through his farm. You know, land isn't worth a whole lot up there. They wanted him to pay for the improvement, and he just tax forfeited the whole thing, except the house. And that's why there's a park with that family surname. I thought, like, no, wait a minute, there's some battles here that are not worth winning. Like, oh, what's going on here? Like this guy inherited something from his grandfather. Mulishness or something. he wasn't like that way in the session, but I thought there's some genetic problem here. But, so that's the mental state. Okay, yeah, the gums, it feels so nice in the teeth. Yeah, I would say aching in the teeth, I've just used that for myself. But it strengthens the teeth, it actually calcifies, it reestablishes the dent, it will get rid of cavities, it will like, really is amazing for dental work. It's not infallible because I guess my last tooth, although that was really from an abscess at the bottom from root canal. I didn't take a root canal. And also it strengthens the tendons holding the teeth to the bone. The tendons that do that. All this suggests that it ought to be good for tendons as well. And Bonnie's use actually suggests that that might be possible. There are, and I've also thought that this would be good for osteoporosis. And I had a student, and she said, well, Deb Francis is a good naturopath, and Oregon says it's good for osteoporosis. And I said, oh golly, finally somebody's actually figured this out. So the next 5 years later, I saw Deb Francis. I said, oh, thanks. The student told me you said that it was good for osteoporosis. And she said, no. What I said was I suspected it was good for osteoporosis. I said, oh golly, you and I are back to the same spot. We both suspect it's good for osteoporosis, but not proved yet. But it's so mineralizing and strengthening to the tendons and to the of the teeth, to the teeth. And often the first sign of osteoporosis is all of a sudden when a woman or sometimes a man starts getting in their 40s or 50s, starts getting a lot of cavities, and then that's followed by osteoporosis. And oak bark is very good for those people who all of a sudden start getting cavities when a rooster is crowing.
I was wondering, is that somebody's son? Is it somebody's son, yeah?
God, I would like to.
Yeah, I
I'd
was
like to
thinking.
get those wolf calls on me. So I was just telling people that I live in Martel, which is only an hour from downtown Minneapolis, and we heard wolves, a couple of them, about 2 weeks ago, early at night, so we're out there. It'll be fun, I think. So. But, okay, so, yeah, let's see.
So with varicose veins,
What?
with the varicose veins, there's also like people that will eat like pansy flowers and stuff like that for the root and bring that up. How does that affect differently than the stringency of the walnut?
Well, yeah. Well, rutin affects the capillary, and like I use, it's just my habit. When so yeah, I use combinations. If you really have a clear oak bark type pattern, I'll just use oak bark lots of times. But I'd be happy to use those other things too, or use other things. But if there's blue and red, like either just generally in the complexion, but especially they're bluish, they're not so ill-formed with red in between. That means there's capillary stasis backed up. The blood is not moving out of the capillaries very well because it's backed up from the veins. And that's real specific for yarrow. But yarrow is a good astringent, remember, that's good for the veins, but it also acts on the capillaries and decongests the capillaries, brings the blood through there. So there's a differential there. Like, I don't know when to differentiate horse chestnut, but horse chestnut's just darn good, you know. When I was at the herb store, there was a formula. It was made by a homeopathic company, but it was a herbal formula. It was 10% of each. 10% horse chestnut, 10% witch hazel, 10% Collinsonia or stone, and then the rest was like filler. And that was a very good hemorrhoid and a varicose vein setup. It's like almost a mindless, such a formula, yeah. No wonder coming up with that, you know. So, and horse chestnut I've seen get rid of phlebitis and stuff too, so that enlarges, which that I wouldn't say as likely that the oak bark would do, but it's a little more diffuse blood stagnation and
Would that be the same as fever, with phlebitis be the same as fever, or would that be
Yes.
different things?
isn't that what?
I mean, that's what, is that what I'm
Okay.
calling fever in the veins?
Yeah, that could be, yeah.
If
Yeah,
you-
but it's smaller and more diffuse than those. It seems like the oak bark fits bigger veins. Oh, and then another thing we learned about the yarrow. Yarrow, I never had a remedy for spider veins, and I had one good thing it happened there instead of her brain. And so she put yarrow on it and it disappeared. And she was telling me this, I said, yeah, you know, you should probably continue that for a couple of months because you might have, she put it on one spot and I said you should take it internally because you might have aneurysms, you might have blood vessels ready to blow out all over the place because yarrow is for aneurysms. And she said it got rid of all her spider veins. It's like, oh, cool. So
This was yarrow internal?
yeah. So
What about the aneurysm with the person who has high blood pressure, the yarrow gets to raise the blood?
no, yarrow decreases blood pressure. Yeah.
But I had a client recently
Oh,
where
it
it
got
raised
bigger. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, it is used traditionally to lower blood pressure though.
Maybe it's a constitutional, is a person like more watery person, or more
She's heavy set, you know.
earthy? I could see might be a
It's more
little
about the
constitution
person.
based.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is yarrow. Yarrow's a fighter.
Yeah, more air.
Warrior.
So I can see yarrow not moving things as well and kind of an earthy, watery person.
Yeah, there's another thing that hemorrhoids, at least, if not, maybe not varicose veins, but hemorrhoids have a reputation of, and maybe aneurysms of being a way to release some pressure off of the heart with high blood pressure. And so the aneurysm closing up may have actually increased some pressure. So one needs to get down under to the blood pressure, which sometimes is easy, sometimes not. With a watery person, I would think maybe not so.
I thought it was related to her kidneys because she had kidney problems.
With a watery person, it's the place I'm going to go is kidneys and high blood pressure and salt.
Yeah, I was going to suggest, even though she's watery, we will suggest marshmallow root is real salty and does lower blood pressure sometimes. And here I actually would use drops, small doses, because you don't want to watch. A watery person doesn't eat a whole lot of marshmallow root. It's like, instead of putting gas on the fire, that's like putting gunk on top of the water.
This is where I would use blue vervain.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, let's talk about blue vervain, actually. We get back to yarrow sometime. Let's see, blue vervain. So, again, blue vervain is real common in the Midwest here. So that would be Verbena hostata, and we have two vervains. One is Verbena hostata. So that's the one that tends to grow in marshes, although it grows elsewhere. It's tall, it's often up to about that high with a bluish, boing, intense boingism, I say, and it, boom, it's got these stalks like that, and then they hang over just slightly like that, but it's got this real intensity there. And it's like real blue, although when you tinker it out, it's mauve, which is the color of the flower of the European vervain. And then we have the hoary vervain, which is, I forgot the last name, Verbena hirsuta. A few people do use that. It does have some different properties, but it can be used somewhat interchangeably. The whole family can be used
Is
somewhat
that one also
interchangeably.
called Germander around here or something?
Well, it shouldn't be.
Someone was trying to tell me that that's what that was, and I didn't.
That's not a legitimate name. Germander is a mint name. There are a couple herbs called Germander, but vervain has a square stalk that looks like a mint. It's got nervine properties, so it's like a mint, but it's not a mint. It's in the Verbinaceae family, which includes vitex, so that's important about it. Okay, so Dr. Bach taught us that Verbena officinalis from Europe is remedy for the fanatics, people who are over intense about things and always trying to convert you to their cause and always trying to tell you how to do it. Now, I found generally the people that come to see me nowadays are more conscious of that, so they don't try to tell other people what to do, but they're trying to tell themselves what to do all the time. And these are the people that come in and they say, like, yeah, well, I should be eating better, but blah, 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 and I should be doing yoga. I did yoga for a while, then I just don't have time. And so I should be doing it, and I should be exercising, and go on and on. It's like, sure. It's like, just chill out, accept yourself the way you are, but this is a symptom. Also, they like to make lists, and So they're like too intense for their own good. It's like they're intense. And so they often have tension in the neck, like because they're like what the Bible says. God says to the Israelites, "You are a stiff-necked people." And their necks immediately stiffened up. Yes, and we'll get stiffer yet. And by that he meant they were fanatics, you know. So it's right from God that you get a stiff neck when you are too fanatic. And then because of the stiffness, it doesn't get well nourished, and you get some atrophy sometimes, and then that neck might settle to the side a little bit, or there might have been a stroke or something. It's very typical. It's just like the plant. You get the stiff flower top, whoa, like a stiff neck. It's like the flowers are heavier than the neck that attaches to the stem. It looks that way, and so that's kind of a strong neck. But then it just falls down at the tip. So it's like strong neck and yes. So those two things come together. So you see that some of the time. Then because they're too intense about things, their injury tends to be hyperextension, overdoing things. And I had a homeopathic proving on this when I first took blue vervain. I thought, well, that's an interesting remedy. And then for like 2 days, 2 or 3 days, I had a feeling in my elbow, like I remembered all of a sudden the memory came back, body memory, typical Minnesota accident. I slipped on the ice and I caught myself and hyperextended it this way, and I couldn't remember where that happened, how old I was, anything. But I remembered that it happened, and it was in my body memory. And I worked at a chiropractic clinic, and the neuromuscular therapist, I had her look at it, she said that looks like a hyperextension. So, yeah, okay. And then it worked out because the remedy had brought up the body memory and released it. So that's something that every once in a while you run across that injury that way. So I tend to use this on constitutional grounds, like with that whole profile. I haven't gotten so much into the physical symptomology, which Phyllis has gotten into quite a bit. So she can teach us quite a bit more about it here. But even just knowing the Constitution, you run across these people so much. It's kind of good to know about them because they bother you when you're taking case history a little bit. It's like, kind of leave yourself alone, or don't try to convert me, or like, it's okay. So I remember one of the severe cases was a tallish girl about 16 and was having heart palpitations. And I asked, "Do you make lists?" And she said, "Yes, I make lists of other people's faults." I was like, "You're not going to get a boyfriend very quick that way." I didn't say that, I just laughed. So we gave her a repeat 6 months later. She had her first boyfriend, so that was good. Jim McDonald just called me on the phone 2 days ago. I saw him last week, and he said his second son, like, even at age 3, he was like, he didn't make a list, he just had a list. He had a stuffed animal that had a list. And if you were on the list, that was good. And if you were not on the list, that was bad. He couldn't write, but he knew what a list was. So Jim gave him blue vervain, which always mellow about. A friend of mine, actually from Harmony, which is real close to here, she helped someone from Iowa who had a very stiff neck with boy, she was that type of person. She was really a stiff neck person. She was like the mother-in-law who was a little too obnoxious, her daughter-in-law. And she had migraines very bad. And my friend wrote blue vervain on the neck, and she had within an hour, terrible migraine for about a day, and then that went. She never had a migraine again. She gave him the blue vervain, and then she got a hold of it. And that all that personality, it gave her insight, so she could tell family members what to do and so on.
Jim McDonald suggested I try a white vervain for someone I was working with that was ADHD adult that couldn't hold focus because it was shaped that way, and it looked fabulous.
Oh. Okay. That's it's not real common up here, but there always is like vervain around. Do you have that one?
A little, yeah.
Yeah, we have it a little, but there's always enough, yeah.
We have, the species we have where I live is Verbena brasilianus.
Who does that come from? Alabama?
Yeah, it grows from Alabama across Mississippi down into Florida and all the way down through Mexico and into South America all the way down to Brazil. So it's the common vervain for, I would say, that part of the world. I mean, it's
So does
just
the top look like a tornado, like the one that white vervain I'm familiar with?
like a tornado.
Yeah, it's the flower spikes all come out at swirling angles all the way around.
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
So maybe it's a different species. Now, this one is, the flower is not always really common on this one. I mean, the stalk is more common than the flower, which is kind of the opposite of what you were saying.
Yeah, if I may say so, this is similar to that one that is grown in flower gardens up here. It's not the same one, but that one's also from South America with the really long stalks and then a little flower head.
Oh,
Yeah, it's
okay.
got, yeah.
And this is also bushy, so there's lots of little stems that come off with a tiny little flower on the end. But a strong central stalk. I've got one in my side yard that I've just that just came up and just let it grow, and probably the central stalk is like about that big round. But it's very dry. You know, and when I gather it and I dry it, I just dry it for a day because it's already that dry. There's like no moisture in it at all. So it's a little bit different species, I think, than what I have up here. It lowers blood pressure. This is in decoction. I've never used it any other way.
So is this your version of the blue that you're talking about?
Yeah, my version of blue. But I would suspect it would have similar properties, you know, across the border. Maybe this species we have, mentally, emotionally, might be less focused on the neck and more on the spine. It's how I look at it. But that's still part of the neck. But with that base and everything, you can see where it really has an effect on all the way up to central nervous system. But I've only ever used it as decoction. It is like one of the most bitter things you've ever got to put in your mouth. To start with.
So is ours.
Very bitter.
Worse than reishi?
Worse than reishi.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty bitter. But it's the first sip is unpleasantly bitter. The second one, you're like, oh, this is too bad. And the third one, you're like, oh, really? You get used to it really
Well,
quick.
and I've had people that really need this, that taste it and don't notice the bitterness, and it
Right.
gets bitter when they no longer need it.
Yeah, exactly. I've had that happen lots of times too. That is a really good indicator. That is excellent indicator. Blue vervain lowers blood pressure like that with just 1 or 2 sips of decoction. It'll bring it down. So if a person has low blood pressure already, I really suggest that they just stay away from it. I mean, it can make them feel like they're going to pass out. And when we do in the herb school where I have in Alabama, we learn the taste of herbs because Southern folk medicine is based on the 4 tastes and the elements that go with those 4 tastes. So bitter is associated with fire, but people who already have, let's say, low blood pressure and they know it, when we do our taste testing, I have them sit and not stand because it will absolutely make them feel like they're going to get black on the edges for, you know, a second or two. It will lower their blood pressure that much that quick. So when someone, it is very specific for, I think, for pulmonary hypertension. And I've had folks just totally cover and never have that again after 2 months of blue vervain, even in capsules. So if they don't want to make the decoction, I'll have them take it in capsule, just like a capsule a day. It really does shift the lungs, it shifts the volume of fluid going through the body, and it's like a permanent change. So that's a good use for blue vervain. Anything to do with blood. Also, it is an excellent lymphatic. It's not only a good blood mover, it will move the blood, it moves the lymph too.
I'm just wondering, when you do consultations, do you take their temperature and do their pulse and their blood pressure as well?
Me? I don't. I'm going to ask if they've been to the doctor and what their blood pressure is. I mean, I'll do their pulse, I'll look at their tongue, I'll do their face. I'll ask them questions. I'm going to assess what their elements, what their southern blood type is, and that's going to take me a whole lot if I can get that assessment. But I don't cover them. But people generally know if they have low blood pressure, if their blood pressure is high. It's pretty easy to discern. I mean, if you don't know if your blood pressure is low, squat down for 5 seconds and then stand up. And if you're standing up like this, with black on the edges, you've got low blood pressure. And I think women, how many of you have experienced that at some point? Very, very common. So the squat and stand test is a pretty good way to tell if your pressure is low. Might not tell you if it's high, but it's going to tell you if it's low. It's a really easy one test there. Also, blue vervain, it moves the lymph in a kind of a different way than you think redwood, rootwood, or cleavers, or even chickweed, or any of the kind of other more common lymphatics. It kind of thins the fluid and moves it from the feet. The lymph tends to gather in the bottom of the feet because if we don't walk, if we're not moving, if we're not breathing deeply, our lymph doesn't move. So there are actually more lymph vessels per square area in the bottom of our feet than any other place on the body, which is why when they do dive tests at the hospitals, they do it between the toes. They do it in the feet. There's so many lymph vessels there. So lymph can congregate at the bottom of the feet. And this can make the feet feel cold. If anybody does reflexology, it's going to make those little hard nodules and kernels in the bottom of the feet. It makes the feet feel kind of also a little dry, not moist initially, although if you really get a lot of congregation of lymph, it will feel more like kidneys will make your feet feel down. Lymph makes them feel dry because everything's trapped in the vessels and it's not leaking out so much. Where the fluid from the kidneys kind of hangs out in all your tissues. There's no place for it to go. So the ankle swell, the leg swell, the feet swell. Lymph swelling is a little bit different, but it can congregate in the bottom of the feet and make the pad of the foot feel full, but the rest of the foot, the center of the foot feel dry. And then the heel feel full, because that's where the lymph vessels are more congregated. So it moves it from kind of the ground up. Even if you're just standing. So one time I was teaching a class and it was like 30 degrees outside and we're all standing around freezing. And I said, okay, our herb taste that we're going to do is blue vervain. And within like 3 sips, everybody drinking their decoction, people were like, oh, my feet are warm. That's how quickly it warmed us all up. It moved the blood, it moved the lymph.
So it warmed the body up rather than making the rest of the body cold. Bring the cold up, it just brought the heat down.
It did. It drops down. Energy is downward. It's a good way of putting it. But it increased the circulation of us just standing there. Everything started moving.
So it'd be good for people with cold feet generally?
Yeah, either that or cayenne, and maybe that's the constitutional. And a lot of times in some of the traditional southern formulas, blue vervain and cayenne are together for circulation and lymphatics.
It's kind of random, but do you know, can dogs have that?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Yeah. No problem. And dogs kind of like bitter. Dogs really do kind of like bitter. They don't mind.
Okay.
Being on
Yeah.
dog's food. Usually do pretty good. Blue vervain is also in the native and the Creek tradition where I live. Blue vervain is a journey herb and used in ritual. It can take you into dream time, into the spiritual world. It can help you journey and figure things out. It's a good one to take before bed. relaxant. Remember, it's in the mint family, so it has relaxing qualities. So it's
No,
one of
it's
those.
not the mint family, it just looks like a mint.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I always thought it was. Well,
No,
I learned
it's
something new.
very funny, it looks like a mint.
But it's not.
Yeah, it's not.
Okay. Well, there you go. All right, it's still relaxing, even if it's not a mint. For people who have like type 2 diabetes and have high blood pressure, which is a very common combination, it is like next number. It's bitter, but then you get the decoction is best, capsules will be okay. It's moving the blood, it's increasing the circulation, which to the extremities, which diabetics are very low in, right? It is relaxing to the nerves, increasing the lamp. It's lowering your blood pressure. I mean, it's a real win-win for type 2 diabetic with high blood pressure. And a lot of times they have trouble going to sleep, or either they want to sleep too much, kind of one or the other, and usually overweight. Well, it's going to be stimulating enough to kind of clear out the congestion type 2 diabetics often have here in the abdomen, and help move the fluid out. And I generally tell them, we'll keep real good watch on your numbers, while you're doing this, because it also lowers blood sugar in that process. So it's just a really good, simple, single herb for that situation. However, it doesn't work good for fiery people in that situation. You'll have to find ginseng works better for those, or sarsaparilla works better for those. But for earth and water types, which diabetics tend to be, type 2 diabetics tend to be either earth and water, really excellent.
Can I ask a question? So you said decoction, right? And then Matthew, you use it just tincture usually, blue vervain?
Yeah, I use it in small doses, like 1 to 3 drops, because it does taste pretty bad.
Yeah.
And I do have some specific uses, which are different from Phyllis. So, I have not used it for anything here. I definitely believe it would be a kidney remedy too, which you did mention we can go into.
Yeah, it is.
Is it
Yeah, go ahead.
leaves and flowers, or just leaves, or
Anything above the ground.
just
Or
Take a
is that
chunk?
Top 6,
Yeah.
8 inches.
yeah?
Not that matters that much, probably. but
Okay.
I just like the flowers so much. I like that signature, that top part.
Yeah.
But it tastes bitter throughout. Okay, so I use it. It's strangely has some hormonal effect, and I believe it's probably lowers when there's too much progesterone, but I think I need to test right now to prove that. But that's what I've figured out over the years. But at any rate, it's for menopause. It's really great for menopause. I got on these symptoms just somehow on my own, but some women at menopause feel like fanatics. Like, I remember one of my clients saying she felt like an nymphomaniac. And, but other things too. So I got onto that way, and then I realized pretty soon that, oh my God, this is a cousin of Vitex, which is often used for menopause. But I like it a lot better, way better than Vitex. And that actually also acts on progesterone. Okay, so it's really good for feeling driven during menopause, and for night sweats or hot flashes. And here we go back to use that doesn't come in handy so much anymore. But this was actually a very primary fever remedy in the 19th century when people had worser fevers than they have today. Today antibiotics. And this is when the pores would not open, when you had a high fever and you just couldn't get a sweat started. And the two really bitter diuretics used to open the skin when it would not sweat were Colchicine and blue vervain, both of which are really bitter but taste good when we need them. And both of them are good for really severe chill. Of course, I've never used blue vervain that way. These both said that way. But so really, in some ways, this menopausal thing is not only hormonal, but it's like a payback for fever issues you have not. That is your karma from your youth. You have not dealt with those fevers took antibiotics instead of opening your pores, which is the natural way to get rid of a fever. That's what Grandma and all the old doctors and Indian tribes and African shamans and everybody all across the world would get a fever. Well, maybe not Africa and South America. The jungles, they don't have to worry about sweat. They just give you cayenne all the time. Well, they keep you sweating all the time. But so keep you sweating, and that's what this remedy. So it's payback time in menopause. You have 2 closed pores or occasionally 2 open pores, and blue vervain acts on the hormones and also on the sweat pores. So just a great case history I love to tell that William told, William Sassier, one of my mentors. That a woman, it's really good for food cravings. And even if you just feel it for 1 or 2 or 3 days during the month, it's good to take during those days. And that's often a high progesterone. Well, if it's not excess progesterone, then it's a hypersensitivity to progesterone. Because progesterone makes you want to eat. Because progesterone, the monoprogesterone is, we're going to get pregnant!
It makes you want to eat fat.
Yeah, and it makes you get fat. Progesterone makes you get fat in about every conceivable way. If you want to eat more, you retain more water and your belly swells because the guts relax to make room for the baby. So it's like everything. Progesterone, yeah, we're gonna get pregnant. It's like period. Oh, can I do this? But so it's always chirping up during those 2 weeks there. But so this remedy, has that food craving. So he had this case where the woman had food craving so bad that she said she felt like a school of piranhas on a feeding frenzy for a week each month. And the other 3 weeks she didn't eat anything. And then she went on a feeding frenzy. And so he gave blue vervain. He learned about it too from Dr. Bach, that fanatic thing. He gave blue vervain, and that totally took care of the problem. So there's some really neat symptoms there. So, yeah.
What were you going to say about the kidneys with the blue vervain?
Well, it makes sense because this yin not strong enough to hold down the yang. That's the kidney yin that's not strong enough, and that means some drying out, which is pretty bad for the kidneys. William always would also say, the first remedy for the kidneys is water. No matter if you're peeing too much or not enough or anything, water, water, water. And you look at stones in some ways you could say, well, it's like drying out the kidneys. And this is a stone remedy. Like one of Dr. Bach's friends, who's a medical doctor, gave this remedy. He had a case where the guy got kidney stones and he went home from work. He was a fanatic about work, like a workaholic. But he was in such pain, he went home. They sent him home. And Dr. Wheeler, he made house calls there in 1910. Made a house call and gave him a vervain flower essence, and he passed the stones within an hour. And then he went back to work.
Didn't hear the fanatic part.
Yeah.
Because he was a fanatic. Dr. Wheeler was Dr. Bach's friend, probably had him take vervain for a couple months. And I remember another description of another person feeling as if driven at the point of a bayonet, like just so intense. And another woman, pain in the neck and musculoskeletal, numbness, tingling in the arms and fingers, so that's cervical vertebrae again too, and pain down the spine. So those are some additional indications. So this is real interesting the way Phyllis and I have used this remedy in similar but really different ways, because high blood pressure fits also like it's just like fanatical. It's like your blood pressure becoming fanatical, one could say. So this is really nice to compare notes here. But my doses are just fresh herb tinctured in vodka usually, then dose 1 to 3 drops, 1 to 3 times a day. So